never liked cemeteries. Not because of ghosts or anything like that. It's just something about them. Too still, too much waiting. My uncle passed last year, and his grave is out in this small town cemetery, about 15 minutes outside the city. It's old, mostly forgotten. The kind of place where the names on the headstones have worn away, and the roads are cracked with weeds pushing through. My mom asks me to visit now and then, make sure no one's messed with his grave. I never say no, but I always put it off longer than I should. This last time, I went just before sundown. Bad call. I wasn't thinking, just figured I'd be in and out. Parked near the entrance, grabbed a little bundle of flowers from the passenger seat and headed in. The silence felt unnatural. No wind stirred the trees, no birds called. Just the crunch of gravel under my feet, too loud in the empty space. I know that's a cliche, but I mean it. No wind, no birds, just my footsteps on gravel. Uncle Dave's grave is near the back, right where the trees start. As I walked, I noticed a few graves that hadn't been there before. Fresh dirt, no flowers, just simple, new headstones. Not surprising, I guess, but they felt wrong. Like they'd been sitting there for years, but something about them didn't belong. Like they'd been there longer than they should have. I found Uncle Dave's plot. It looked fine. Grass was a little overgrown, but nothing serious. I set the flowers down, said the usual, and turned to leave. That's when I saw it. A headstone a few rows away, facing mine. My last name was on it. Same spelling, same everything. I stopped, stared. I don't have a common last name. Not unheard of, but not one you see every day. My chest got tight. I told myself it was a coincidence. Has to be. But then I stepped closer. There was a first name. My first name. And a date of death. Tomorrow's date. I felt my stomach drop. My whole body went cold, like my blood had stopped moving. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. The stone was real. Solid. Not some trick of the light or my brain playing games with me. The letters were carved deep, same as the others. I turned, scanning the cemetery. Expecting what? I don't know. A camera crew? Some jerk hiding behind a tree, laughing at the prank they'd pulled? But there was no one. Just rows of graves and the trees swaying at the edge of the lot. I looked back at the stone. The dirt in front of it was packed tight, but there were no signs of fresh burial. No loose earth, no disturbed grass. It had been here for a while. Longer than it should have. I don't remember walking back to my car. Just getting in, locking the doors, and sitting there with my hands on the wheel, staring at the cemetery entrance in my rear view. I wanted to drive straight home, but something kept me there. Frozen, like if I left, I'd be giving in to whatever this was. Eventually, the sun dipped below the trees, and the shadows stretched long across the ground. That's when I saw movement, a shape far back in the cemetery, tall, thin, standing between the stones. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But then it moved. Not toward me. Not away. Just shifting, almost like it was adjusting, settling, watching. I turned the key so fast my fingers slipped, then tried again. The engine rumbled awake, and I threw the car in reverse, sending loose stones skittering across the pavement as I backed onto the road. My headlights swept over the graves, over the stone with my name on it. It looked different now. Darker, like it had been there forever. I spent the night in my living room, lights on, TV muted, listening for something. Every creak in the walls, every passing car, made my skin crawl. Morning came slow, like it was hesitating. But when it did, I was still here, still breathing. I haven't gone back, haven't even driven past. My mom asked if I checked on Uncle Dave's grave, and I lied, said everything was fine. I didn't mention the other stone. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear gravel shifting outside my window. I used to cut through the cemetery on my way home. It wasn't out of some weird fascination. I just hated taking the long way around. The cemetery sat between my neighborhood and the main road, and if I hopped the low stone wall, I could shave 10 minutes off my walk, 15 if I didn't mess around. I started doing it in high school, mostly when I stayed out too late. It saved me from a lot of lectures from my mom about wandering around at night. The first few times, I was jumpy, sure, but after a while, it became normal. Just rows of old stones, a few statues, nothing dramatic. The dead don't care, right? Last year, I moved back home for a bit just to get on my feet again. Same town, same streets, and yeah, same shortcut. It felt kind of stupid at first, a grown man sneaking through a cemetery like a teenager, but old habits die hard. I don't know when I first noticed the extra grave. It was near the back fence, past the older section where the names on the stones were worn down. I only noticed because I nearly tripped over it one night. No headstone, just a rectangle of fresh dirt, which was weird because I hadn't seen any new graves back there before. But I didn't think much of it. Maybe I just hadn't been paying attention. The next night, it was still there, but it looked neater, like someone had packed the dirt down tighter. By the third night, it had a headstone. That stopped me in my tracks. I wasn't crazy. I knew it hadn't been there before. It was a simple marker, dark stone, no flowers or anything. I stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. The name was hard to read, like the letters weren't fully carved yet, but the date caught my eye. It was today. I felt this weird drop in my stomach, like missing a step on the stairs. The wind picked up, cold against my neck. I backed away, telling myself I was just tired, that maybe it was a family plot, and they were prepping the site for a burial. I took the long way home that night. The next day, I made myself walk through the cemetery again. In daylight, it was less creepy, just stone and grass and birds picking at the ground. I headed straight to the spot. The grave was gone. No headstone, no mound of dirt. Just empty, undisturbed grass. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of it. There was no way I had imagined the whole thing. I even checked around the area, looking for fresh dirt. A patch of grass that didn't match. Nothing. I stopped taking the shortcut after that. I told myself it was just a weird mistake. Some trick of the light. Maybe even a dream I had mixed up with reality. I almost convinced myself. Then, a few weeks later, I was driving past the cemetery and saw something that made my skin crawl. A fresh grave. Near the back fence. Same spot. Same shape. And this time, there was a funeral. People in black. A priest. Someone crying softly. I slowed down, watching as they lowered the casket into the ground. I didn't stop. I didn't want to know who it was. I never cut through that cemetery again. But sometimes, when I pass by, I glance toward that spot, and every now and then, I swear I see fresh dirt. I used to work at a cemetery. Nothing creepy, just maintenance. Mowing, trimming weeds, clearing out old flowers. It was a peaceful job, actually. Quiet. The only part I hated was when they had me fill in a fresh grave. Most of the time, the backhoe did the work, but sometimes they wanted it done by hand. For respect, they said, which sounded nice, but when you're standing there with a shovel, staring into that deep, dark hole, it doesn't feel like respect. It feels wrong. Anyway, this happened about 6 years ago. A funeral had wrapped up late in the afternoon, and my boss told me to stay after and take care of the burial. It wasn't unusual, but something about this one bugged me. The coffin had already been lowered when the funeral ended, but no one stayed to watch the burial. No family, no priest, nothing. Just me, the dirt, and the quiet hum of cicadas. I started shoveling. The first few scoops always feel the worst, like I'm undoing something that shouldn't be undone. But after a while, it's just work. I got lost in it, focusing on the rhythm, the weight of the shovel, the sound of dirt hitting wood. I didn't notice at first. I don't know how long it had been happening, but at some point I realized there was an extra sound. Not just my shovel, something soft, muffled. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I listened, nothing, just the wind moving through the trees. I shook it off, my mind playing tricks on me. That kind of thing happens when you're alone too long. I kept shoveling, but then it happened again. A faint thud. My fingers tightened on the shovel. I told myself it was settling dirt, maybe something shifting deep in the ground. That's all. Then another thud. Louder this time. Closer. I dropped the shovel. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring into the half-filled grave. The dirt was uneven, clumped where I had been working. The coffin was still visible beneath the loose soil, and then I saw it. A shift. Not big, just the faintest movement in the dirt. But enough. Enough to make my skin crawl. I wanted to run. I should have run. But instead, I leaned forward, just slightly, barely breathing. And then I saw the fingers. Gray, wrinkled. They pushed up from the loose dirt, curling slightly before sinking back down. Like whoever was inside was trying to move, but couldn't quite get the strength. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over the pile of dirt. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked around, expecting someone else to see what I was seeing, but there was no one. Just the cemetery, stretching quiet and endless in the fading light. I turned back. The dirt was still. No movement, no fingers. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I hadn't just seen what I saw. Then I did something stupid. I grabbed the shovel and dug, fast, desperate. I don't even know what I thought I was going to do. Save them. Get proof that I wasn't losing my mind? I don't know. I just knew I couldn't leave until I was sure. I got halfway down before I hit the coffin. My hands were shaking. I wiped sweat from my forehead and knelt down, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. I stayed like that for a long time, waiting. Nothing. Then, a scrape. Faint. Almost nothing. But it came from inside. I launched myself out of that grave so fast, I don't even remember climbing. I just remember running, not stopping until I reached my truck. I never told my boss. I never told anyone. The next morning I came back. Expecting what? I don't know. Maybe a mess, maybe an open grave, maybe something I'd have to explain. But everything was perfect. The grave was filled. The headstone was in place. No disturbed dirt. No sign I'd ever touched it. I checked the name. I checked the dates. And then I looked at the graves next to it. The ones on either side. Both were empty. Reserved plots. Waiting.